Hi everyone, thank you very much for joining this webinar. This very first tutorial of our series may look easy, but it's not trivial at all. It deserves good attention from you to learn, or to at least to make sure that these concepts are at your disposal. My name is YC Lee. I am an AI project consultant with Scientific Formosa here in Taiwan. I have been a consultant for the past 10 years. Before that, I have taught or worked in the United States and then in Taiwan for more than 20 years. This very first tutorial is to make sure that we can derive the potentially useful attributes of the object at issue for exploration and training purposes. In this small example, the records available are actually at a lower granularity level than the level for the objects we are interested in, right? In other words, here we have 24 job records associated with 6 employees. And at the employee level, we would like to predict something on. First, let's add some additional columns for the job records. For example, duration and the starting age of each job, an indication of the work being the past or an active one. And then lastly is the job sequence numbers by the person. And we should be able to use quickly the RapidMiner operators to come up with a result like this with all the columns we like to have and the output records sorted by the person name. Then we are ready to move up the granularity level from jobs to the employees, right? For example, we like to add the average salary of each person. We also like to include the latest 3 job pay for each person. And finally, we like to have some statistics about the salary and the duration, job duration for each person. Again, using RapidMiner operators, we can quickly come up with this output with only 6 records and 1 for each employee. On top is mostly the columns related to the latest job, and on the bottom that will be then the salary, histories, and statistics, and on the job duration as well. Allow me to provide some background information for the series of tutorials that we have compiled for our audiences. And this tutorial, being the very first one, will serve as some kind of entry level, or it's just a review tutorial. So to make sure that the audience will be able to follow the subsequent tutorial with relative comfort and confidence, right? We have prepared this tutorial mostly from different data preparation perspectives, and we also compiled end-to-end scenarios to demonstrate the pre-processing techniques. And what are the motivation and the objectives then? RapidMiner is very powerful and easy to use, but we have unfortunately continued to see some of our customers struggled to master the platform the way they like. And one of the key reasons, as we came to realize, is a lack of creativity and instinct that blocks the users from problem solving and problem formulations even. So oftentimes the users do not even know what attributes they can and should have in order to formulate the machine learning problems properly, right? As we are motivated to leverage the platform, our objective here are to highlight those concepts and techniques and associated with the data set transformations, meaning we try to be more familiar with the input and output or possible data transformation. And that kind of knowledge will come in handy when we are presented with high level and mostly vague business problems. It helps us to come up with different alternatives for the problem formulation and the format of the data sets that are required for model training or subsequent tuning purposes. An important reminder here is that they are prerequisite for these tutorials. Though the order of these tutorials is recommended as shown here, they can be taken in any order. But we need to make sure that we are familiar with the usage of the tool itself first. It is okay that the number of operators we are familiar with is still limited, but these terminology should be clear to everyone here. Okay, as you can see, the moving circles kind of remind us that all the functionality of these buttons or whatever should be clear to us before we take on these tutorials. And the repository shown here is what we used in a hands-on workshop, but it is rather straightforward. So you can build yourself or just gradually build them up while watching this tutorial. It looks simple, but it's not trivial at all if you really run through them and take the chance to learn all the operators that are involved. So after reading in the simple data set, right, we start manipulating some datetime, and you will also see the usage of macros to define the latest date you try to refer to. And this group into collection is where we can move up the granularity level from jobs to employees. And we can also do some aggregation, and the renaming operator is particularly useful to rename the system generated aggregation column names. And we probably have to practice some of this regular expression so as to handle these particular tasks well. And then we have this windowing and lagging, right? This is like a in time series case where next to the column of the current values, we try to add another 1 or 2 or 3 or more columns for the past values. And that's where we're using some of this lagging concept. And lastly, the join operator is to combine all the derived attributes together. Okay, the very first step will be to read it in the table we just shown, the table of 24 job records, correct? And here I have this Excel that is sitting in one of my file directory, right? So I just read it in, and then I will store that in the RapidMiner repository as an entry, right? This is an example set we successfully read it in, right? And RapidMiner is fairly robust or intelligent, you may say. And as long as you have some kind of the first row as a column, and usually they will catch most of the metadata. And this particular entry at the list, of course, at the beginning is empty. But once you kind of successfully read it in this input file, and once you click it, that will show you that all the attributes that the RapidMiner has caught with the right the various types, right? So the result usually will show rather quickly, and please note that to the left there are some options, and we always will be presented with the first option, that is the table showing the number of attributes in output, right? And there you can immediately goes to the turbo prep or auto model to do subsequent exploration. But here I would like to point it out is that the next option, that is statistics, move it down, you'll see the statistic for each entry. each attribute. Usually in most of these data science courses, the instructor would suggest the students that before you do anything, try to understand the data and try to visualize the data, see the histogram or whatever. So the statistic is something you would like to check it out first, right? Here, for example, we just click on the salary and you will see the distribution of the salary among all these 24 records. Now, move further down, that will be the visualization chart. And here they will be easily available for you to click on some of this particular chart you like to have. And we do know this, behind this visualization tool, there will be a lot of computation that have been done by the tool, right? And conceptually, they will do a lot of grouping or aggregation or different kind of presentation method, right? So this is something we have to pay particular attention to. Now, take a look at this. Here we would like to show a box plot, right? And a box plot usually will show 5 values: the maximum value, the median value, and then the minimum value. And also they will show the upper quartile and the lower quartile, right? And here simply we can just put it as now the salary as a y-axis and the person as an x-axis. But remember here is that we will try to build up our instinct or the imagination, creativity, whatever, in terms of data transformation. So keep in mind that in this visualization tool, the system, the tool itself is generating those kind of data transformation in order to present this chart to you, right? And the move on that, for example, we like to use the bar chart to show this. And then in RapidMiner, usually for the 2-dimensional charts, you can easily add a 3rd dimension, that is using the color, right? We'll group it by person, and then we will color it by the job types. So for example, if you look at the second person, Grace, right? And then the first job will be in the green color, that was an analyst job. And her second job will be in pink, that is the scientist type of job, right? So again, keep in mind that there's some computation behind. If we can make sure to have some kind of intuition about this kind of computation, then later when we try to derive our own attributes, that will give us. Now we can manipulate some datetime attributes, right? Here we just make it a little bit more involved, so that will be a bit more interesting, right? We are looking for 3 additional attributes. The first one will be the duration, and the second one will be the age when a particular job started, right? And the third one is the status, indicating whether that job is a current job or the past job, right? So first of all, we need to know that out of those records, one of the particular thing is that there are some records with missing end date. And of course, that implies that job is the latest active job, right? So when we try to calculate duration, we do know we got to have a reference date, right? So usually we can use the set a macro, for example, as a current date. That can be the date you try to generate this report, or the date when your IT personnel pull out the table from corporate database for you, right? Whatever way, we just try to use a current date and to indicate and to serve as a reference for us to calculate duration. So if you look down to the first 2 rows in the generate attributes, right? The first one, of course, just to calculate duration temp. And the second one, then you look into the particular fact whether this end date is missing or not. If it is not missing, then of course we can just cook it as the duration temp, whatever. But if it is missing, then it's a time for us to use this macro here. And you should be able to see that The macro usually is indicated as a percentage sign and use a big bracket to enclose that particular macro name, right? So in this case, we calculate our duration correctly, and we can move on to see this age start, right? So again, usually sometimes roughly people would just take the difference between the end date and the birthday, no, the start date and the birthday, right? And use the unit of year. But here we are a bit more careful, and we try to make sure that the age is calculated correctly, right? So it depends on whether the start date of the job is before or after your birthday. Then we should do some slight change, and you know the logic, right? Anyway, so this will be able to calculate all these three attributes: duration, age start, and the status for us. So this would be the output, right? Duration and age start and status as we like. So again, up to this point, you feel that it's very simple and you can easily do that, that's fine. And be happy for yourself. And just bear with us. And for the second half, right, you can take a quick look. Now let's visualize this output. And here we use the bubble chart. And x-axis is the person, y-axis is the age when each job is started. So it's in the increasing order, right? And luckily, the size of the bubble is getting larger and larger. The size of bubble actually reflects the value of the salary, right? And we add a third dimension, that is the color blue for male and green for female, right? And here is how we specify this scatter bubble chart, right? And in terms of the tool tips, we can click to show it. We can also click to say, oh, we will combine all the tool tips together when they were shown, right? Now, up to this point, we have been dealing with the job attributes, even though we seem to focus on the employee levels unconsciously, right? It is actually the visualization tool that has helped us greatly to see the overall picture. We know there are computation built behind the visualization tool, and depending on the chart types, there are different kind of aggregation or summaries that are involved, right? But these visualization effect or the results are an interactive tool for models that to be deployed for the operators. For the model that we are trying to develop as a RapidMiner workflow, we need to automatically derive such attributes. So here we need to use something like a grouping or looping or whatever together to help us in this particular regards, right? Now, it's interesting that early days when the database concept, relational database were introduced, well, that implies how old I have been, right? Anyway, people have two different schools of thoughts. One is so-called set theoretic, and they would like to talk about relational algebra, where they think a set being one particular group of things, and then we like to use relational algebra to join, to intersect, or whatever together to come up with the final result. So that conceptually is at a more higher level, right? More global level. But another school of thought is what they call is set theoretical. So people would like to qualify each set by the property. So whatever they have is just more of a descriptive, right? And they will just try to describe for any component whatever condition that will govern or qualify the members of each set. And even for the output, they would describe that way. So here, when you are first seeing this particular group into collection and followed by the loop collection composite operators that actually refer to whatever mindset you are more comfortable with. So just bear with me first, okay? And we first group this data set into a subset by the person. Immediately, the operator will just split all these 24 records into 6 example set, right? And the loop collection will just iteratively take one example set at a time to let you operate a sequence of this whatever inside flow, right? Conceptually, this is to offer some school people who prefer to focus on a particular set at a time. So for that set, they were just saying, well, I'm only looking at whatever job associated with Adam, for example, right? I don't have to worry about other subgroups. So for this subgroup I have in hand, I can sort them. I can generate the sequence ID for them. I can generate whatever attributes I like to have. And then finally, I pick up the attribute I like to have. So for example, here we just include whatever previously we had done. In addition, we generate this job sequence number based on the ID we just generate, right? So this more of focus or narrow view actually allow people to think more naturally. And that's where some people would like to use this approach. While on the other hand, some people may just like to stay at a higher level using the aggregation or grouping, whatever concept to do the specific flow or data pipe they like to have. All right, so hope I don't confuse too much of you, but here is this group into collection and loop the collection to do individually and relying on RapidMiner, this particular operator that will just repeat the same kind of sub-process for each example set inside this collection. Okay. Now looking at the result, the first 3 columns in red, duration, age start, and the status. As we can see, these are the attributes that we can calculate horizontally, naming our general value based on the record itself only, right? But the very last one, that green column, job sequence number, is what we can generate vertically, meaning I will have to look at all the record in this particular subgroup in order to see what kind of job sequence number that has. Together, this group and the loop, they help us quite a lot, right? And the records have been grouped, and we can of course continue to aggregate just per subgroup basis. Inside it, we can come up with different summaries. But for the next one, we'll just try to stay away and we'll talk about aggregation from the very start. Okay. Now move on to the fourth one, right? You can of course do these aggregation things within the previous looping type of effort. But here instead, we try to think in terms of relational algebra things, or we think more higher level, thinking that whatever aggregation I do to a certain subset of attributes, my result is a single row. So I just qualify that single row and I will put together at the end, right? So what by that I'm talking about this, right? Here the aggregate, if you are familiar with the aggregating type of operator, so just bear with me, right? For aggregate operator, I would like to select some of these identifiers. So if you can put gender and person will be the ID of my new group, right? So inside this operator, I'm going to calculate the minimum of the salary and the maximum of the salary, or average of the salary, or even standard deviation, right? For what group? Again, that group is identify the person and the gender. Gender is included here because we are not using gender for the aggregation purpose, and the gender will be just 1 to a person will be just one gender here, right? For just assume this is the case. Now, moving down here, we would already have a lot of values aggregated for us, right? And then for each subgroup, we actually have just one record. Now, what we need to deal with is this the system generated attributes, names. Usually they will have something like the minimum of the salary or whatever, and then even all the parentheses together. And that gets a little bit verbose, and it's not good for later reading purposes. So in RapidMiner, it is constantly used, that is, we can open it up and try to rename these attributes. And oftentimes you would use something like rename by replacing. And here you would also choose the option of using regular expression, right? And regular expression is a little bit intimidating, but again, I just want to take this chance to remind you that there is very convenient tool there. So for example, I hit this help things, they bring up a panel for me to specify the regular expression, right? And I may have some vague idea about the syntax or whatever, and you can just click on that pull down. They will give you a quick list of the syntax, right? But what is important here is that the right half, they give you the item shortcut, right? Usually these are the attributes that will coming into this operation. And then so while you start specifying this regular expression, partially or whatever, you start seeing whatever match the case is being coming out. And once you hit the right regular expression or the matched item out, exactly what you want, right? And then of course you put the parentheses to encapsulate whatever value you want to extract it out, and the rest will be just throwing it away or whatever, right? And so here is the $2, $1 are the two parentheses I put in that regular expression. And to make sure, you can also use the button there. You can enter some text, and it will show you how it shows some preview for you to do this. By spending some time here, I just want to make sure that you can take advantage of this particular feature, and then that you can simplify your flow, your workflow in RapidMiner, and then make sure your flow is much more readable, okay? So at the end, we do come out with this, and it just make sure that we replace the original system generated attributes by a more readable and a concise format. Now, of course, at the end, you would like to reorder the attributes by moving up in this panel, right? Okay, the output will look like this. The first three attributes, as I mark it in red, will be some attributes that you probably should use a little bit of imagination to think this. When you do those aggregations, if I just sum up all this job duration, that will be the total year of experience, right? And in terms of number of jobs, I will just count whatever job records inside that particular group. So for Adam, they have 6 jobs in total. So here is just you use properly those maximum or count or average to derive what attribute you like to have. As for the rest, like salary average or salary standard deviation or whatever, this are those direct result of those aggregation, but we use the rename operators to simplify the names, right? Okay. Now let's talk about the second last operations we like to talk about, namely the windowing, where the important concept is legging, right? So if you imagine that your value column, the timestamp column, is like a circular column. And if you turn that clockwise by 1 unit or 2 units, or counterclockwise by 1 or 2 units, and then you are forming additional columns next to the current value column, and that's we have some good windows to do time series or to do whatever subsequent job you like to do, right? So for example here, inside this loop for each employee, of course, and we try to create some kind of lagging type of operation. And what I'm showing here is just we described. I like to have the previous 2 values and the next 2 values along with the current value. That will be forming totally 5 attributes, right? And usually RapidMiner, when they do this lagging and whatever missing value at the end or at the beginning, they will just trim it off. So here I need to explicitly mark it as extend the example set. So that will fill in with missing value and show me the total list of this as we show here, right? So you can see that we actually just have 4 values for this particular employee, right? And then because I look into the past and look into the future, so here I actually get 8 records. Of course, some of them won't be useful, depends on the particular problem you like to see. For example, you like to use the previous values as your observation, as your additional attribute to look at. And then you'd like to forecast some values like time series analysis. So you can all use tables like this, right? And so you can just filter out a little bit whatever, like the job sequence ID, if that is a missing value, just throw it away. So here I get this 1, 2, 3, 4, 4 records, right? So that's just probably what we like up to this point. We do know for the first 2 records, there are some missing previous values. And then for the last 2 records, I would be missing some of this, the future values, right? Because they are not yet available. Okay, so the result will look like this. And one particular pattern you will see is just like the slanted whatever shape you would like to call. And you can see the value is actually all identical, moving a little bit slide to the right up, right? And then now we can talk about the very last operation that we are interested in, right? And we want to combine the attributes we generated along the way. For example, here, we'd like to take the output from this aggregation job, and we also like to take information from the history that created by the windowing, right? Naturally, we just do a natural join, or there's an inner join here. But join is kind of tricky, so we have to be always very careful about whether we are adding so-called the superiors type of records. For example, if the records is not really the ID or whatever, and that can happen in the real life, right? In this situation, you cannot deny it, but you can unconsciously create some of this partition product that doesn't exist in your original data space. So we have to be careful about the join type we want, right? And then in this case, we are just interested in, for each person, the latest job with some histories. So what we need to do is, for example, create an indicator. That latest indicator, just use some condition to specify that only this kind of record is what I would like to have in my final report. And we go through this indicator through a filter operator, right? And then, of course, it's time to select the attributes, knowing that some of the attributes are only for intermediate purposes, right? And like particularly those temp or whatever. But anyway, here I just want to bring to your attention that sometimes when we look at others' process, be very careful about the select attributes. If they happen, like this case here, they mark the inverse selection, right? The attributes shown in this panel are actually those we want to remove, we don't want to keep. So be careful about this because that can be tricky. And then also, the next option is include special attributes. Here we did not run into the case, but some special attributes is like you have the prediction result, some confidence or the predicted results. But then later you want to turn this prediction result as the observation value for yet the next stage of the prediction flow or whatever. So that time you also need to keep this value. So always be careful about these two particular options when you are dealing with select attributes. So at the end, we of course can reorder these attributes again for the readability purposes whenever you look at example set, right? That's the end of the result. And as you can see here, we have this duration, job type, working. These are all from the employee's very latest job. And for the first one, Grace, so happened that she's not currently working, right? So the others are all this, see, is a year experience. We explained that before. It's just to sum up all the job duration. But to the right, you can see the salary -1, salary -2, right? We did not include salary +1 and +2 here because we are not forecasting any type of things. We are just using the previous one, previous two values for probably for model building or something else. Okay, let's have a quick recap. Right? For this simple table, we do two steps. One is to add the columns for the lower granularity level, that is the job level. So we create a table like this. And then we use some other operations and try to add additional column. In particular, we try to move the granularity level up from the job level to the employee level. Okay. And the output will be something like this. Okay. So what's the takeaway then? Okay. This tutorial looks simple and you can treat it as a review, right? But there are key concepts involved. And if you think harder, you can already sense a lot of data preparation techniques. And again, we're talking about has a very strong feeling about the granularity levels, right? The level where the level is at is some level you want to do prediction on. But your given data might be a level down or two level downs of this level. So you always have to be aware of what level you're talking about and then try to do good processing to bring up this desirable attributes, right? Okay, now these adding additional attributes or derive that horizontally or vertically, these are all called, can be considered as a data augmentation, where we just like to enlarge our observation variables, right? So we deal with a lot of tabular transformations, join, group, aggregation, lag, or something like that. And just a quick review, see, we went through these two, right, operations. And then we generate attributes. We use set macros to reserve a reference date. And then we start doing this group into collection and combine, and then individually do a sub-process. And then we append all the result together. And there we use some sort or generate ID type of operators. And then we do the aggregations, and in particular, we emphasize the renaming type of operation to simplify the system generated aggregated columns. And we also talk about the lagging and the windowing things, and we'll do some filtering out of the examples, right? Undesirable output. And then finally, we join all them together. Okay, I think we come to the end of this particular tutorial, right? And then just briefly, Scientific Formosa is a local representative of RapidMiner in Taiwan from 2017. And it's provide technical support and professional services. And if you do have any license or contract issues or problems or needs, just please contact us. And or you have more general question in digital transformation initiatives, you are also more than welcome to contact us. Okay, thank you again for attending today's event. Bye-bye now.